There are moments on live television that nobody plans for. Moments where the script goes out the window, where the prepared questions and the rehearsed segments and the professional polish of a major sports network just stops. Where something real breaks through the surface of everything carefully produced and curated. And the people sitting at that desk have to just be human. This was one of those moments. ESPN's Get Up, morning television. A show built on energy, on debate, on highlights and hot takes, and the fast-moving rhythm of sports news. Hosts who are used to talking about trades, about game film, about who's in and who's out and what the numbers say. And then Chris Johnson walked in. Or rather, the news of Chris Johnson arrived. And everything changed. Because this wasn't a trade rumor. This wasn't a suspension, or a contract dispute, or a coaching change. This was something heavier than all of that. Something that cut straight through the noise of the sports media cycle and reminded every single person watching, at home, at the gym, on their phone during their morning commute, that there are things in life that matter far more than wins and losses. Chris Johnson, CJ2K, one of the fastest human beings ever to wear an NFL uniform, 39 years old, diagnosed with ALS. And the reaction on Get Up, the raw, unfiltered, genuine reaction from people who knew him, who covered him, who watched him rewrite what a running back could be, told you everything about who this man is and what he meant to this sport. Let's go back to the beginning, because you cannot fully feel the weight of this moment without first understanding what Chris Johnson was. Not just as a football player, but as a force, as a presence, as something that arrived in the NFL in 2008 and made people realize they were watching something that didn't come around very often. Chris Johnson grew up in Orlando, Florida. He was not a highly recruited prospect coming out of high school the way some future NFL stars are. He didn't have every major college program in the country throwing scholarships at him. He went to East Carolina University, a school in Greenville, North Carolina, that most casual football fans couldn't find on a map. But what he did at East Carolina turned heads. He was fast. Genuinely, almost incomprehensibly fast. The kind of fast that makes defensive coordinators reach for their notes and find nothing useful written there. The kind of fast that makes coaches on the opposing sideline just shake their heads because there is no scheme, no coverage, no assignment that fully accounts for a human being who moves at that speed. When he arrived at the 2008 NFL Scouting Combine, the football world got its first official confirmation of what scouts had been whispering about. Chris Johnson ran a 4.24 in the 40-yard dash. 4.24 seconds. The fastest time ever recorded at the Combine at that point in history. Not fast for a running back. Not fast for a football player. Fast for a human being. Period. Full stop. The kind of number that people in that building printed out and kept because they knew they were looking at something they might not see again. The Tennessee Titans drafted him 24th overall, and Nashville had no idea what was about to happen to them. His first season, 2008, he ran for 1,228 yards and 9 touchdowns as a rookie. The kind of season that would be a career highlight for most players. But for Chris Johnson, it was just the warm-up. It was the universe saying, okay, let's give people a preview. Let's let them think they understand what they're dealing with. They didn't understand. Not yet. 2009 arrived. And Chris Johnson did something that put his name in a conversation that very few people have ever been invited into. He rushed for 2,006 yards. 2,000 yards. In a single NFL season. It had only happened 5 times before in league history. The names associated with those seasons, Eric Dickerson, Barry Sanders, Jamal Lewis, Barry Sanders again, Jamal Lewis, were names that belonged in halls of fame and highlight reels that never get old. And now Chris Johnson's name was next to them. His first season, 2008, he ran for 1,228 yards and 9 touchdowns as a rookie. The kind of season that would be a career highlight for most players. But for Chris Johnson, it was just the warm-up. It was the universe saying, okay, let's give people a preview. Let's let them think they understand what they're dealing with. They didn't understand. Not yet. 2009 arrived. And Chris Johnson did something that put his name in a conversation that very few people have ever been invited into. He rushed for 2,006 yards. 2,000 yards. In a single NFL season. It had only happened 5 times before in league history. The names associated with those seasons, Eric Dickerson, Barry Sanders, Jamal Lewis, Barry Sanders again, Jamal Lewis, were names that belonged in halls of fame and highlight reels that never get old. And now Chris Johnson's name was next to them. But the rushing yards were only part of it. Because Chris Johnson was not just a runner. He was a complete weapon out of the backfield. He caught passes. He made plays in space. He was the kind of player who could hurt you in 15 different ways before you figured out how to stop one of them. His total all-purpose yards that season, rushing, receiving, returns, came to 2,509. An NFL record that still stands today. In 2026. Still there. Untouched. With his name on it. He was the AP Offensive Player of the Year. First team All-Pro. A Pro Bowl selection. And he did it all on a Titans team that finished 8-8. A mediocre team. A team that had no business producing one of the greatest individual seasons in NFL history. Except they had Chris Johnson. And sometimes, one person is enough. He went on to play 6 seasons in Tennessee. And then moved on to the New York Jets and the Arizona Cardinals before his career ended in 2017. By the time it was over, he had accumulated 9,651 rushing yards, 2,255 receiving yards, and 64 total touchdowns. He was a 3-time Pro Bowler, a legend, a man who had given everything he had to a sport that asked for everything in return. In 2024, he was inducted into the Tennessee Sports Hall of Fame. It felt like a bookend, a beautiful, complete story. The fast kid from Orlando, who went to East Carolina and ended up becoming one of the most thrilling players in the history of the Tennessee Titans. Celebrated, honored, living his life. He had a podcast. He had 4 kids. He had a wife named Brittany who stood beside him through all of it. He was 39 years old, and he had the whole second act of his life stretching out in front of him. And then something started to feel wrong. It began with his hand. His right hand. A weakness that crept in quietly. A grip that didn't feel quite right. Nothing alarming on its own. He was a former NFL running back. His body had been through a decade of professional football. Of course there were going to be things that felt different. Of course there would be physical reminders of the price he had paid. He and Brittany talked about it. They decided it was probably just the aftermath of football. The body settling into its post-career reality. But the weakness didn't settle. It grew. It spread. And when the doctors had gathered enough information, when the tests were complete and the specialists had reviewed everything, and there was no more room for uncertainty, they told him what was happening. ALS, Amyotrophic Lateral Sclerosis, Lou Gehrig's disease, a progressive neurological condition that attacks the motor neurons, the nerve cells responsible for controlling every voluntary movement your body makes. Your arms, your legs, your hands, your face, your voice, your ability to swallow. ALS doesn't attack one thing and stop. It keeps moving. It progresses. It takes more over time. And there is no cure. There are treatments that can slow things down for some patients, but nothing that stops it. Nothing that reverses it. Nothing that gives back what it has taken. And in Chris Johnson's case, it came with no warning. There is no family history of ALS in his background. His doctors describe his case as sporadic ALS. The form that occurs without a genetic cause, without a traceable origin, without a satisfying answer to the question of why. It is the most common form of the disease, which is its own kind of painful irony. The most common form. The one that arrives without explanation. The one that could happen to anyone. It happened to Chris Johnson. He was diagnosed in 2025. He was 39 years old. And when he sat down with Michael Strahan on Good Morning America to tell his story to the world, he did something that surprised people. Something that said everything about who he is beneath the records and the highlights and the nickname. He didn't lead with anger. He didn't lead with despair. He didn't ask for sympathy in the way that would have been completely understandable. He led with clarity. He said, "First, I want people to know that I'm still me." He said ALS has changed what my body can do, but it doesn't change who I am. And he said it using a speech-generating device. Because the disease had already progressed to the point where his voice, that voice, was not fully available to him anymore. And still he sat there, with Brittany beside him, steady, present, choosing to speak. He talked about how fast the progression had been. He said that just over a year ago, he was picking up his 7-year-old daughter, so she could blow out the candles on her birthday cake. A simple moment. A father and his child. The kind of moment that happens in millions of homes and gets taken for granted, because why wouldn't it? Today, he said, he couldn't do that. 1 year. 1 year between lifting his daughter and not being able to lift her. ALS moves that fast. And now the Get Up desk. When this news broke, when the footage from Good Morning America began circulating, when the clips of Chris Johnson, with that speech-generating device, and his wife by his side, started reaching people across the sports world, the reaction was immediate, and it was real. ESPN's Get Up brought together voices who had history with Johnson, who had watched him play, who had covered the Titans during those extraordinary years. And what happened at that desk was not a sports debate. It was not analysis. It was not the kind of segment you run to fill time before the next highlight package. It was a room full of people trying to hold themselves together while processing something genuinely heartbreaking. The people at that desk had spent years covering Chris Johnson, the football player. They had broken down his film. They had talked about his yards per carry average, and his release off the line, and his vision through the hole. They had debated whether his 2009 season was the greatest individual running back performance ever. They had used all the professional language of sports media to describe what he did. The people at that desk had spent years covering Chris Johnson, the football player. They had broken down his film. They had talked about his yards per carry average, and his release off the line, and his vision through the hole. They had debated whether his 2009 season was the greatest individual running back performance ever. They had used all the professional language of sports media to describe what he did. And now they were sitting there trying to find language for something entirely different. Because this was not about yards anymore. This was about a man. And they knew him. Not always personally, though some did, but in the way that sports journalists know the athletes they have spent years covering. In the way that watching someone play at an elite level, week after week, year after year, creates a kind of connection that is real even if it only goes one direction. You feel like you know Chris Johnson if you watched him play. Because there was something about the way he played that was personal. Something that communicated who he was even without words. The joy in it. The abandon. The sense that every time he touched the ball, he was going to give you everything he had, and then try to find a little more. That's not a product of scheme or coaching. That's character. That's who a person is. And the people at the Get Up desk knew it. One of the things that struck people most about Johnson's interview on Good Morning America, and that got talked about extensively in the aftermath, was that he said he wanted to share his story for a specific reason. Not just to let people know what was happening to him, but because he hoped that by going public, he might help someone else. He said if sharing his story helps even one person get diagnosed sooner, if it inspires more research, if it gives another family hope, then it is worth it. Think about that decision for a moment. To be in the middle of something so devastating, something so personal, something that is happening to your body and your family and your daily life in ways most of us cannot imagine, and to choose to make it public not for your own sake, but for someone else's. That is not a football move. That is not something you practice on the field or learn from a playbook. That is the measure of a person. At Get Up, when the conversation turned to what Chris Johnson meant to football, to the Titans, to the city of Nashville, the words started to pile up. Records, stats, highlights, the 2009 season, the all-purpose yard record, the 4.24 combine time, the Pro Bowls, the 6 straight 1,000-yard seasons, all real, all remarkable, all completely true. But underneath all of it was something that stats don't capture. Chris Johnson made football feel like something worth watching. There are players who accumulate impressive numbers over long careers through consistency and reliability and doing their job well. And that is genuinely valuable. That matters. And then there are players who change the energy of a stadium when they touch the ball, who make the people in the seats lean forward, who generate a specific kind of electricity that you can feel even through a television screen. Chris Johnson was the second kind. Every handoff was a possibility. Every screen pass. Every time the ball found his hands, you held your breath because you knew that something could happen. That he could find a crease that shouldn't exist. That his legs could shift into a gear that felt unfair. That he could take a simple play and turn it into something you'd be talking about 20 years later. Every handoff was a possibility. Every screen pass. Every time the ball found his hands, you held your breath because you knew that something could happen. That he could find a crease that shouldn't exist. That his legs could shift into a gear that felt unfair. That he could take a simple play and turn it into something you'd be talking about 20 years later. That gift is incredibly rare. And the people at Get Up understood it. They had been there for it. They had covered it and commented on it and celebrated it. And now they were sitting with the news that the man who had given them all of those moments was fighting something that moved faster than he ever did. The Titans organization responded to the news with a statement from controlling owner Amy Adams Strunk. She said that some people leave a mark on an organization that you just cannot put into words. She said Chris Johnson is one of those people. She expressed the franchise's love for him and their commitment to supporting him. And there are growing calls, loud ones getting louder, for the Tennessee Titans to induct Chris Johnson into their Ring of Honor. While he is still here, while he can experience it, while the people who love him can watch it happen. That conversation picked up speed after the Get Up segment, after people saw the footage, after the reality of what is happening settled in, and reminded the football world that there are things more important than timing. Chris Johnson's 2009 season set the all-purpose yards record in 2009. That record still stands in 2026. 17 years later, nobody has touched it. Not because nobody has tried. Not because the sport hasn't produced exceptional players. But because what he did that year was genuinely extraordinary. And extraordinary is not easy to repeat. His 40-yard dash time at the Combine was a record that stood for years. His impact on the Titans franchise is the kind that gets passed down from generation to generation of fans. He has already earned his place. But now the urgency is different. Now it's not about waiting for the right moment, or the right year, or the right committee decision. Now it's about understanding that time is something we don't always have as much of as we think. The Get Up discussion kept coming back to one thing. Not the stats, not the records, not the highlights, as beautiful as they were. It kept coming back to the man himself. To how he showed up on Good Morning America with that device, and that steady presence, and that quiet insistence that he is still himself. That the disease has taken things from his body, but has not reached the part of him that matters most. I'm still me. That sentence. 3 words. Sitting at the center of everything. Because here's the thing about ALS that people don't always understand from the outside. The disease attacks the body's ability to move, to speak, to function. But it does not attack the mind. It does not take away who you are. You are still in there, behind eyes that still see everything, behind a mind that is still fully present, fully aware, fully yourself. You just cannot show it the way you used to. Chris Johnson, who once showed the world who he was by running through defenses at speeds that seemed impossible, now has to show the world who he is in a different way. Through an interview, through a device, through the quiet courage of sitting in front of a camera and telling the truth. And somehow, he is doing it with more grace than most people could manage. The Get Up panel was visibly moved. Veterans of sports television who have covered championships and tragedies and retirements and scandals and every kind of story the sports world produces, moved. Because this one was different. This one reached past the professional distance and touched something human. Because Chris Johnson's story is not just a football story. It is a story about a father who wants to pick up his daughter and cannot. About a husband whose wife sits beside him with an unshakable steadiness that tells you everything about who she is and how much she loves him. About a man who spent a decade being one of the fastest people on the planet and who is now navigating a world that moves differently than it used to. It is a story about what we choose to do with the time we have. Chris Johnson chose to go public. He chose to use his platform, smaller now than it was during those Tennessee Sundays, but still real, still powerful, to try to do something good, to try to push the conversation about ALS forward, to try to make sure that researchers and donors and policymakers understand that this disease is real, and it is devastating, and it deserves more attention, more funding, more urgency. He chose to say to other families who are walking this road, "You are not alone." He chose to say to the world, "I'm still me." He chose to say to other families who are walking this road, "You are not alone." He chose to say to the world, "I'm still me." At the end of the Get Up segment, in the way that these conversations sometimes end, when there is nothing left to analyze, nothing left to debate, nothing that statistics or historical context can add, there was just a moment of stillness. A moment where everyone around that desk seemed to be doing the same thing. Remembering a Sunday afternoon when the Titans had the ball and Chris Johnson took the handoff and the crowd rose to its feet because something was happening, something was coming, something that you couldn't quite name, but could absolutely feel. And then he was gone, into the secondary, past the linebacker, beyond the safety, down the field, faster than the camera could follow. Those moments don't disappear. They live in the people who watch them. They live in the city of Nashville. They live in the history of the sport. They live in the record books where his name still sits next to numbers that haven't moved in 17 years. And they live in Chris Johnson himself. Still him. Always him. Even now. Especially now.